Hey, welcome back to the channel. Today we're going to look at another budget gaming PC. This is kind of a follow-up to a video that I did about a year ago. This one uses an older machine, but it has a much better graphics card, much better processor in it, and you get much better performance that you ever could have gotten with that other budget machine, but it still stays under 200 bucks. So here we go. So for this build, I'm using this HP Elite 8300 small form factor that I got off of Craigslist for about 60 bucks. It's got an i5 3470 processor. When I got it, it had 4 gigs of RAM and a 250 gigabyte hard drive that had Windows 7 loaded on it, and no video card. So obviously I'm going to need to do some upgrades on this if I'm going to use it for gaming. So I added an additional 4 gigs of RAM to bring that up to 8. I swapped out the 250 gigabyte hard drive for a 500 gigabyte SSD drive, and I loaded Windows 10 on there instead of Windows 7 that was on there. And I put in a GTX1050 video card. It's a 2 gigabyte video card. The reason why I use that is they're really affordable. They provide really good performance. And again, I'm trying to keep this a budget gaming machine. There's other video cards that you could get, but you have to remember that this machine doesn't have a power supply that would supply power directly to the card, so you have to get a card that doesn't require the direct power to it. Alright, so even though this machine is a small form factor, it's actually got some really good port selections. It has 6 USB 2.0 ports, that's 2 on the back and then 4 on the front, and then 4 USB 3.0 ports that are all on the back. So I loaded GeForce Experience on this machine, and then I let it optimize all the games I'm about to show you. So these games are played with that optimized settings, so you can get a little bit better performance and sacrifice a little bit of the quality, or you can get a little bit better quality, sacrifice some of the performance. There's a lot of tweaking that can be done. This was just with the recommended settings, no other changes. So the first thing I tried was GTA 5, and I was actually really impressed with how well this performed. Again, with those recommended settings, I was getting between 60 and 80 frames per second. It was averaging right around 70 frames per second, which is extremely playable. It worked really well and looks beautiful. Not all the options are set to high, but it still looks great even at those recommended settings. Next up is Battlefield 1, and I was averaging right around 60 frames per second on this one. And the video that I have is just the single player, but I did play some multiplayer as well, and I was getting right around the same frames. So it's a really viable option for even playing multiplayer. 60 frames per second you can get away with. You're not going to want to play this professionally, obviously, but for the average gamer, it works great. Again, you can sacrifice some of the quality and get much higher performance out of it, but this worked great, again, just with the recommended settings. Next up is Star Wars Battlefront. Now, this is the older Star Wars Battlefront. This isn't Star Wars Battlefront 2, simply because I don't own that yet. But I was getting 60 to 70 in Star Wars Battlefront. Again, that's both in single player and multiplayer. This worked great as well and looked really good. This one would require some tweaking, I think, because the recommended settings, the graphics was set a little bit lower than I think it needs to be. So with some tweaking, I think you can get just as good performance, but improve the visuals a little bit. The last one I tried is PUBG, because PUBG tends to not be optimized very well, and a lot of machines, even really powerful machines, struggle with this. Again, with that recommended settings, I was really surprised that I was getting 60 to 70 frames per second. So that's indoors, of course, I was getting a little bit higher frames, and then outdoors, it would occasionally drop below 60, but for the most part, it was between that 60 and 70. Again, you could probably tweak the settings, get a little bit better performance. I know a lot of people like to set the detail real low in PUBG and just optimize that performance. And again, it worked great. So all in all, I'm actually really impressed with how this build performs. That i5 3470 processor is still actually a really good processor by today's standards. And that GTX 1050 card, that actually really blew me away. I was not expecting that card to perform as well as it did, especially since it's only a 2 gigabyte card. The performance that I got in these games, they were all really playable. Now, if you're a pro gamer or you want to max out your graphic quality and get the highest frames per second, you're going to be playing in 4K, this obviously is not going to be the machine for you. You're going to want to build your own machine. But if you're just getting started into PC gaming, you want to get in there for under 200 bucks, or you're a casual gamer, and you just want to have a machine to play some games now and then, this is actually a really good solution. Look for an older machine and then buy those, low end of the 1000 series GTX cards. Those are great. There's also some really good Radeon cards, but again, remember that you have to get a card that does not require the external power. So you're either going to use an older card, or you need to be really careful, and you also need to look for a video card that is specified to be able to fit in a small form factor case, because you can't use a full height card in this case. So thanks so much for watching, guys. I really appreciate you stopping by again, and come see me on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. I love meeting new people and chatting with them, and I will see you in the next video.